Hello, welcome to another video. This one's going to be a little bit long because I am going to do a full review of the Covenant of Steel trilogy by Anthony Ryan. So yes, let's dive into this. So first part is going to be spoiler free and the next part will kind of be more spoilery. I'm gonna try and not take forever on this, but it'll mostly just kind of talk about the main stuff that happens in each book and specific moments that really hit something in me. Overall, the Covenant of Steel is a story about betrayal, revenge, about finding a purpose, and also figuring out if your allegiances are good or bad. It is told in first-person narrative by our main character, Alwyn, who starts off as just an outlaw, and a lot of shit happens to him, a lot of bad shit happens to him, and he experiences a lot of stuff, and throughout the entire trilogy, I'm very happy to say that he does experience character growth. He is overall very cynical, very sarcastic, and I don't blame the guy, honestly, because the setting that this trilogy takes place in is very medieval. It's very medieval in the sense of religion is the primary way in which people find solace. There is very low education standards. There is war everywhere, and even just the cleanliness levels are not great. Like at one point they go to the main city and they're just like, it smells like shit, which is what I would expect a city to smell like in medieval times. This is very sword and shield type of fantasy, and the fantasy elements are pretty minor in my opinion. Like, this is an epic world. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new world. But yeah, the magic is really more connected with the religion, which is a very large theme in this trilogy. The influence that religion can have on people, I feel like, was a very large part of what the series messaging was about, but also I think a large part of it too was you always have a choice and you should always be careful what choices you make. Another one is obviously the atrocities of war and war crimes done in the name of religion and of a higher purpose. Yeah, you can probably guess how that goes. And then finally, a theme that I think is in the book for sure is gentlemen. Just because a lady is pretty and she says she likes you doesn't mean that she is a good person, and doesn't mean that she is the only person that you should ever date. Okay? Yeah. So, with that said, the overall plot of the story, it's about Alwyn being a minor character by all accounts. There's no way in which he would normally have a massive influence on the world, but somehow he becomes one of the primary influencers on the potential destruction of the world, of his world anyways. Now we're gonna get into some spoilers. I'm gonna keep it as short as I can with just going over broadly what happens and some of my favorite moments throughout the whole trilogy. Starting with the Pariah. The Pariah is, once again, this is where you get introduced to Alwyn, and this is where you kind of see the horrible level of atrocity that can happen in this book, and you very early on get this impression of what's gonna happen. The writing style, it'll have like little teasers kind of, it'll have foreshadowing quite often. So you're not necessarily unaware of what's gonna happen throughout the trilogy, but the details kind of escape you. So Alwyn starts off with the king of the outlaws, Deccan Scarl, who he's really more of like a self-proclaimed king of the outlaws, but Alwyn was taken in by him. Alwyn was a whore's son, came from a whorehouse. He didn't have much for his life, and honestly, there isn't much ambition to Alwyn other than just trying not to die, just trying to survive. So he starts off with Deccan, and I am going to say one of my favorite parts in the book is very early on, because so Deccan ends up getting murdered. All of the outlaws that followed Deccan got murdered because Deccan was getting a little too ambitious. He wanted to try and become a duke, and yeah, they were massacred in the night. But I wanted to read part of what happens when Deccan gets executed, where he's asked, what are your last words? And he says this: "But I do seek pardon from you," Deccan went on. "I stand convicted as a thief and a killer, for that is what I've been. I can claim reasons, but they're lies, and you've heard them all before. I could claim that I stole to eat, and I killed to keep what I stole. But the truth is, I stole and I killed for ambition. I'll suffer no shame for the nobles I robbed or for those I killed, but I will suffer it for stealing from you, for killing your kin and your kind. Those are my true crimes, and for that I seek your pardon. And he was obviously saying that to like the common folk. But then, so after that happens, there's this part in the book. I had never seen a traitor's execution before, so only learned later that it was a custom for the executioner to hold the severed head up and proclaim justice done in the king's name. This knight, however, had little regard for custom that morning. As soon as the deed was done, he turned smartly about and strode to his former position, resuming the same posture, bloodied sword pointed down. His head failed to turn as silence descended, refusing to regard the constable's expectant stare. To my surprise, there were no shouts, no cheers from the crowd. The decapitation had been met with a sharp inhalation, but none of the wild celebration I'd expected. Usually, the air was thick with cheers when an outlaw dangled from the rope or a heretic suffered a public whipping. It may have been his testament, or the unexpected swiftness of his end, but that day the crowd saw no reason to celebrate the death of the outlaw king of the Chavine forest. That I thought was such a powerful moment because, I don't know, it had that moment of outlaws, they have a purpose. They often are this kind of anti-hero of, well, fuck the system or whatever. And Deccan's death, even though, like, legitimately, Deccan is alive for this long in the book. There is this much left, and yet he has such a powerful influence on Alwyn throughout the entire trilogy. And he's not the only one. Alwyn meets a lot of different people that end up influencing who he is, and you really do see the impact it has on him. So, shortly after Deccan dies, Alwyn ends up in a pretty violent altercation in which he's accused of stealing something. He's just trying to survive. He's hiding because technically the outlaws should all be killed, and so he is trying to just blend in and not get murdered for Deccan's crimes. But he gets caught and he gets hung, and I genuinely thought he was gonna die. I was like, oh my gosh. He does get saved by a knight, but then the knight says, well, I unfortunately can't actually fully save you, so I do need to put you in the pillory. And that was a gruesome scene. If I've ever read one before, that one will stick with me for a while. The despicableness of humans in this trilogy. And I know that that is something that comes up a lot in some fantasy, especially like dark fantasy novels and things like that. But in this one, holy shit, there are times when I'm just like, wow. Yeah, but I think it's accurate, especially if you're in a setting that's kind of medieval times, you know? People were so easily swayed towards violence because they had nothing else to do with their time. They had no way to vent out frustration. They would just have people with their heads stuck in a wooden board and they could throw shit at them and vent out their daily frustrations. So after that, Alwyn is sent to the pits, which is basically a prison that no one can escape. In the pits, he meets Silva, and Silva has a plan to escape, but Silva is a very religious woman who teaches Alwyn how to read and write, and also teaches him about the religion, about the, I forget what it's called, what the religion is actually called. They just call them like ascendants. They worship the Seraphile, which is the good god, I guess, and then there is the Malicite, who is the bad one. So Alwyn becomes a scribe. He actually ends up being a very learned man, and he is kind of a scholar, really, once you get to the end of the first book, really. You realize that he is very much driven to knowledge. He's not really religious. You don't really get the sense that he's a very faithful man, but the teachings that Silva tell him are those of kindness, and that he sees value in. And that is kind of just who he is throughout. As much as he is skeptical and sarcastic and cynical, he is kind at his core. And I think that is what Silva saw in him the entire time, and that is what Alwyn decides to do his best to spread around. But he doesn't want to do it for him, or from his perspective. He does it as Silva. So Silva ends up dying in their attempt to escape the pits, and she wrote a testament, and Alwyn believes that that testament will change things, will make things better for the people, will make people realize that they can't just listen to the church. They can't just always put their faith in what the church says, and they need to actually think for themselves, because Silva really did advocate for that, which is just be kind and don't be swindled by people who tell you you can buy your way into heaven, basically, okay? Like, it was very clear the connection that was being made between our own history of the development of Christianity and and its influence in medieval times, and also the atrocities and wars that happened with other religions that did not follow the one religion that was believed to be the only one. After the pits, Alwyn meets Evadine Corlane. Now this character becomes pivotal. Evadine Corlane is a duchess, I guess, or the daughter of a duke. She's very religious, and she believes that she can rid the world of the Pretender. The Pretender is a guy who believes that he should rule because he claims that he has royal blood, and he's a threat, and they believe that he will bring about the second scourge. The scourge is, the destruction of the world, and so Evadine is like, I will kill him, and I will rid the world of this scourge, and I will rid the world of this bad man. So Alwyn sees the potential in making an alliance with Evadine in order to spread Silva's message of kind of destroying the structures that the world lives in now with the crown and the church and all of that. A lot of stuff happens there. I'm going to skip quite a bit here and kind of just get to the basics, which is that Evadine dies. They end up fighting on different fronts because the first time they fight, they do chase off the Pretender, and then they find out that the Pretender is potentially hiding somewhere else, and then the crown is using Evadine's army to try and get rid of other competition, and so they get sent somewhere else, and it ends up being an ambush, and then Evadine dies, and everyone that serves Evadine are like, oh, she can't die, and so Alwyn reaches out to the Sack Witch. The Sack Witch, the best way I could describe her is like a pagan witch, basically, a pagan goddess almost. And so she tells Alwyn, are you sure this is what you want to do? And he says yes. And a little side note here, the Sack Witch, she asked Alwyn to find someone who could translate a book, and in the book is Alwyn's story. Everything up to even like the future. And so he doesn't know what the hell that means. He's just like, what the hell? Why do you have a book that tells my story? Who wrote this? How are they writing it? And she's like, don't worry about it. In the typical cryptic way of, we shall see. So the Sack Witch brings Evadine back to life, and from there, Evadine now proclaims herself as a risen martyr, that the Seraphile brought her back to life. Something to understand, Evadine does not like the Carith. Carith is basically what the Sack Witch is, which I'm just gonna say is like the pagans, okay? And so the company, Alwyn and the others who were there who know that Evadine was brought back to life by a Carith witch, they won't say anything to her because they're like, she will freak the fuck out, just let her believe that she was brought back to life by the Seraphile. And this is where Evadine gets a little bit crazier and crazier. So now we get to book 2, The Martyr. In this book, we start off with the attack on a duchy because the king is not happy with one of the dukes in his realm, and Evadine's army needs, support, and so they're now the religious army in the service of the crown. There are multiple sieges at the beginning of the book. Honestly, this one dragged a little bit at the beginning. I had a hard time. I skimmed a little bit because I was like, okay, it's a siege, stuff is happening, whatever. They do eventually get the duchy, and it's pretty horrible what happens. The wife of the previous duke, or the duke that wasn't listening, she does like a mass suicide with her children. Only one of the children is saved, and then that children is now doomed to be married to the crown and will never be able to escape her fate. It's kind of horrible. But when it gets interesting, which is about halfway through the book, is when Alwyn ends up stuck in Carith lands. And so here is where he meets the Carith, the pagans. He learns about Verith, which is the magic, basically, which is what gives power, and he learns that the Sack Witch is held in very high regard by these people, and they call her the Doinlich or whatever, and he has her marked. So no one is willing to hurt him because he is marked by the Sack Witch. And Alwyn has like a kind of a training sequence where he learns how to sword fight from another knight who ends up stuck in the Carith lands as well. And Alwyn meets this other girl, a hunter who wants to be a warrior, and he meets kind of like I don't want to say the counterpart to the Doinlich, to the Sack Witch, but he is held also in very high regard, but he doesn't have the same abilities as the Sack Witch. It's very cryptic, but basically he knows that Alwyn has a purpose that the Sack Witch is trying to have him fulfill. So Alwyn goes back to Evadine with his new friend, Huntress. Lilat is her name, or Lilith. And this whole time, Alwyn has begun to start noticing that Evadine is not quite the same. She's becoming stranger and stranger. And when he was in the Careth Lands, he learned a little something where he was like, that's a lie. There's no way. Like, he's in denial about a thing, okay? And they keep going. And so from there, they meet the Pretender's army again. And this time they actually capture him. And the Pretender ends up telling Alwyn his testament. And Alwyn learns that the Pretender really did have royal blood. And he learned a lot of stuff from the Pretender and the stuff that he went through and the hardships of his life. And Alwyn, throughout all these meetings of people, he learns more about this world and about what is right and what is wrong, because it's a very gray area type of thing. There is no like perfectly good and perfectly wrong. But I just want to read this one part where it's the Pretender's execution, and it's after Alwyn took his testament over the course of many days. And I thought this particular part was extremely powerful, just this one paragraph. I got drunk the day they executed the Pretender. Although the word drunk seems markedly insufficient for the welter of inebriation into which I cast myself. In the sleepless hours since concluding that final interview with Lachlan, which is the Pretender, I hungered for oblivion. I wanted the day of his death to be a day that I never lived, nor at least rendered into some vague, best-forgotten nightmare. But it was real. Lachlan died, and I watched it happen. Then I drank yet more. It didn't help. Oh man, and here's the thing, is that I'm reading that to you. Off of here, you might have read these books, maybe not. But even like before then, like you don't really know who the Pretender is, but the way that Alwyn makes these relations with people and learns things from people and the impact it has on him, it's just, I don't know, it's so incredibly written. It's so well done. From there, afterwards, Alwyn gets some intel that there might be something he wants to check out somewhere else, so he goes out scouting and he ends up getting caught, and there he meets another person that knows about the Sackwitch. And this person has been kind of traveling around pretending to be someone from the church, and Alwyn, basically this guy is jealous of Alwyn's connection with the witch, and especially he's upset because he knows that Evadine is not good. And here is where Alwyn kind of finally faces, it's at the end of book 2, where Alwyn kind of finally realizes, oh my god, Evadine is in the service of the Malicite. She is not guided by the Seraphile, because, you know, she had all these visions and stuff that supposedly were guiding her towards the good of the world or whatever, but she's getting like closer and closer to that edge of that's not right. And the book ends with Evadine murdering the man that kidnapped Alwyn, and then they proceed to Alwyn and Evadine proceed to have sex on the field. Yeah, let's just say I was not happy about it. And now we get to the final book. Now, we ended the Martyr with Alwyn finally realizing that Evadine is cray-cray, and Evadine is potentially serving the Malicite. But, you know, he continues to serve her in the 3rd book, and I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, she's insane. What the hell are you doing? This one picks up right after their sexy times, which is wonderful. It's great. And Evadine wants to go after the people who took Alwyn, and so they do that. They meet some new people. There's stuff that happens, but little by little, Evadine is slowly becoming more and more obsessed with this idea that she knows the right way, that she knows how to fix the world. So she is going to destroy the religion, or not destroy the religion, but she's going to get rid of the church, and she's going to get rid of the crown, and she is going to be the queen. And so they invade the capital city, and the current child prince, because the king died in the field fighting the Pretender in book 2. I should have probably mentioned that. But the princess, which is his mother, they flee the capital, and Evadine takes control. And this is when she finally learns that she was resurrected by the Sackwitch, not by the Seraphile. And this reaction that she has is the epitome of someone who will not accept that they are wrong. Let me just read this to you, because this shit drove me nuts. It was her anger, her condemnation, her self-interested revulsion, no gratitude, no appreciation for all I, Swain, Willem, and so many others had risked to save her. The supposed soiling of her soul wiped it all away, for she was the anointed lady. She was the chosen of the Seraphile, a delusion forever broken, unforgivably so. And then she proceeds to murder Swain because she tried to kill Alwyn, and now Alwyn is like, oh my god, yeah, nope, I need to kill this bitch. She is going cray-cray, she gonna be a tyrant, it's gonna be bad. He fails miserably, and he gets taken, and he's imprisoned, and then Lilith, the Kareth who came with him, she tries to save him because she saved him the first time when he was captured in in book 2. She tries to save him, and she gets hung, and it's just so horrible. So many people die in this trilogy, and I kind of wish that they had more to them than just dying, but it's whatever. He realizes, I have to stop this. I caused this. I have to stop this. So he tries to go find the child king and his mother, the princess, and he wants to get them to work together and get rid of Evadine. And, you know, he feels bad because, yeah, he perpetuated this. He continued to let Evadine believe that she was the worker for the Seraphile, that she was the oh-so-great anointed lady who would do everything and change the world. And he finally realized she's never going to help him spread the word of Silva and her message of kindness. It's just going to get worse and worse. She's destroying the world. They make their way to the Kareth lands, where they know that Evadine will eventually try and attack there because she hates the Kareth so much. I mean, she's traumatized by it apparently because trinkets were shoved in her face when she was a child, seeing visions that no one accepted she was seeing. Here's where Alwyn learns where this religion comes from, which honestly I didn't quite expect it, but basically there's like an area in the Kareth lands where there are two figures that are frozen, or petrified rather, in a state of what I think is like combat, and I think it's the Malachite and the Seraphile that are just stuck in this forever fight, but thankfully it's not actually happening, it's just in the, yeah.
I had no idea how to explain this part because in the book it's a pretty trippy moment. So basically I just kind of understood it as there were two figures that were having an internal battle, like on the spirit realm or something.
Alwyn has always been kind of, you know, skeptical about it, but now that he's seen it, he's like, yeah, no, I can't, that's evidence right there. So he has to take a piece from the Seraphile, a piece of her wing, of the feather or whatever, and as he holds the feather, he can now speak to the dead. And this is something the Sack Witch told him he had to do, that this would help him in stopping Evadine. And so now that he's holding this stone feather, he can see the dead and talk to the dead. And I really feel like it was really unfortunate that he saw Deccan, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be like a moment with Deccan, and it's so short, and I feel like so much more could have been done there, but it wasn't. And even him seeing the dead, like, it was just such a short part that didn't really seem to have much meaning. The whole ending of this book overall felt kind of meh to me. But yes, they do end up with a massive army of both people who were leaving where Evadine was being a tyrant ruler and killing anyone who didn't agree with her ways, and she was just laying waste to the land. And so anyone who could escape heard word of Alwyn starting his own army, right, the traitor, and so they were joining him, and then the Kareth were also joining him. And so he ends up with this army. They, you know, march to Evadine, and yeah, they end up killing her, and Alwyn has a child with her, and the way that this book ended basically made it seem like we might get a companion series maybe, or companion book maybe, about Alwyn's son, who he had to pretend died because, well, no one really wants to know that the child of a crazy lady who served the Malachite and was destroying the world is still alive. That's a lot. I feel like I skimmed a lot of stuff, but that's the entire trilogy. I genuinely enjoyed reading it. I think it was a great time. I don't think these were the best books by all means. The first book is the only one I gave like a full 5 stars. I think it was the strongest one in the trilogy, but as a whole, it was really good. The biggest criticism I have for it is the side characters. They were all very interesting and very individual and had their own personalities that I really liked. I just feel like they were all just part of Alwyn's story and they didn't have much agency, which I wish could have been a little bit different. And then even the part of like Alwyn loving Evadine, I didn't buy it. I told someone, I was like, I don't think Anthony Ryan should ever write romance if he ever plans to. I don't think he does. But yeah, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you didn't, you know, I'm sorry. I try, but it usually remains pretty chaotic in these videos. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. And if you didn't, that is your prerogative. I will see you in the next one. Bye.